Hyman. 2013 Harbuck Award winner, Taylor Tyson. Taylor is a junior from Loganville, Georgia. When he was in the 5th grade, his teacher told him he had a flair for words, and here he is today. I should mention that Taylor also won the fiction category of the Roy Powell Creative Writing Awards. We sponsor early spring semester, so you're on a tear. Taylor is influenced by writers such as Douglas Adams and Ayn Rand, and in turn values both verbosity and nonsense. In the future, Taylor hopes to find a career in music journalism or synchronized sleeping. Congratulations, Taylor. Thank you, sir. Read. This is for you. It's one of the burdens of winning this award is carrying the big basket.
Well, thank y'all for coming out. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to see everybody. I know a lot of y'all. The first piece that I'm going to read is a poem. And before I read this poem, you should realize that my poetry writing style includes finding a bunch of words I like, writing half a poem with those words, deciding what the poem is about, writing the rest of the poem, and then going back and altering the poem based on what I just decided that it was about. So, first for saying that, this poem is entitled Skeletal Industrial. Licking lips lubricate the teeth on gears that grind us all into the ground. Working steadily into nightmarish tossing slumber on even the most sleepless paralytic nights. They watch and record. They call it progress. They call it a day. No one sees the factory that they return to. It has been draped with foil and facade. It underlies lives and waits to engulf. That was it. First poem. My second piece is a very, very short fiction piece, also called flash fiction for the uninitiated among you. I wrote in Professor Valeri's class. Where's Professor Valeri? This one's called Re-Entry, or How to Ensure a Shooting Star. Initial testing had gone perfectly. Training had gone without a hitch. Henriksen's superiors passed him with utterly stratospheric colors. Floxfield, South Dakota had never had a local hero before, especially not an astronaut. The key to the city of Floxfield didn't actually unlock anything. It was far too big to fit in any keyhole, but small enough that Henriksen's superiors let him take it for display in his quarters on the space station. It wasn't deemed a hazard. Campton was Henriksen's shuttle pilot. Younger, chummy guy. Were he in any normal line of work, he might have been called a yuppie. Nice enough, even though he did play his god-awful heavy metal a bit too loud on the ride up. Still, he was reliable, and he had a knack for theoretical quantum physics. 149 days Campton had gone. 99.3333333333% of the way through a 150-day mission. The idiot was in the shuttle back when he'd let slip that he'd screwed around with Henriksen's wife and daughter and sister to boot the month before they both went up. Henriksen wasn't even sure what Campton had said to keep himself away. All he knew for sure was that these stains probably wouldn't ever come out of the key to the city of Floxfield, South Dakota, and that there was a cloud of red droplets lazily lifting about the now pilotless flight console. Meanwhile, gravity pulled stronger. And my lengthiest, third, and subsequently final piece is going to be part of a fiction piece that I wrote also for Professor Valeri's class. I was getting gold out of that class. It was great. So productive. And this story, we had to do a historical piece of some sort. So I had a really stupid idea. Then I had a really, really stupid idea. So I went back to the really stupid idea and decided to write about something that I'd never written about before, which was a drag queen in the Stonewall Riots in 1969, which, if you don't know about that, probably not gay. Congratulations. So, starting about halfway through the story, I hope y'all can catch on, and everyone in here looks moderately intelligent, so I know y'all can. I said, the door to my room made a god-awful squeak. It had for the entirety of the few months I lived there. The room itself was squalid, but that was my fault, not the landlord's. I'd been absorbed in work for weeks. I'd become obsessed with saving enough to purchase the dress, now pristinely pressed and hanging from my closet door. $200 indigo draped from a wire coat hanger. In that dress was where my dreams lay. All I had to do was slip it on and walk out the door. 4 hours later, I was born again, almost directly back into Robert's fair lane. Backseat this time. Sammy was shotgun, Morris was beside me. He was still cleaning me up a bit. "Hey, tits," which was what his nickname was for me. "Your tits ain't quite even. Let me fix that." "The hell do you know how tits are supposed to look, Morris?" Robert asked. "I know enough to know when one's a basketball and the other one's a softball." "Thanks, Morris," I muttered. "No problem. I'd been reborn all right. Makeup covered my face. Passion oozed from every clogged pore. I'd taken the high heels off to get into the car, but those were just as gorgeous as the dress, flesh-colored and dotted with rhinestones. I was breaking the law even donning all this finery, but I gave less than a damn. I did, however, give a couple of damns about what I would be calling myself that night. I was still unsure. Several names did drift past my inner eye. Chloe, Francisca, Mabel, but none of them struck me as right. For a second, I remember quite clearly considering calling myself the Studebaker Flamingo, but I was grasping at straws by then, and the Stonewall Inn was fast approaching. I never felt more like a queen than I did on midnight, June 28th, 1969. Morris, who was just the tiniest bit buzzed from some scotch he'd kept hidden away from Sammy until now, insisted that Robert stop in front of the Stonewall to let the lady out, at which point he burst from the driver's side back seat and ran around the car to let me out. "Ma'am," he crooned playfully. "Thank you, sir." Morris's white tombstone teeth lit up the dinginess of Christopher Street. "More'n welcome." There was no red carpet, just grimy pavement and used cigarette cartons. Instead of flashbulbs, there was the flickering light of the Stonewall Inn sign. Rather than adoring fans, there were a few straggling men and women making their ways down the street. It was enough for me. It was my standing ovation. Morris insisted on walking me to the door and addressing the peephole therein. A rough Bostonian growl resonated from behind it. "The hell are you here for, Mr. Missy?" "Relax, Ralph. She's here with me." Morris obviously knew the fellow inside. There was a pause and then an unlocking sound from within. "All right, don't just stand there. Move it." The man that the cracked doorway revealed, Ralph, was towering and bearded. I high-stepped past him with confidence. A queen is entitled, after all. I'm sure he'd dealt with plenty like me, but I was just as sure no one in this place had dealt with the woman who was me. The bar and dance floors were crammed with people, almost exclusively men, but I saw several women like myself and some others who I wasn't completely sure about. It was too dark to label people beyond that. The marginalized mass was swaying along with the music on the system. Diana Ross. Always Diana Ross. The crowd wasn't simply swaying, though. To me, it was seething. There was something rippling just below the composure. There was tension in the biceps of arms draped delicately around necks and over shoulders. Even the softest kisses I could glimpse held a cornered dog's fear. This was my first time somewhere like this, but I knew that I had joined in with a crowd perched on the edge of a tipping scale. I was going to catwalk along that edge. "What do you think?" Morris had seen someone he knew and melted into the crowd. It was now Sammy who stood beside me, grinning. He and Robert must have parked and caught up. "It's fabulous," I whispered, only slightly put off by the crowd of clamoring boys who had congregated near the bar around Robert. "I never thought it would be so alive." "Well, enjoy, Jeremy, or Jerry Lou, or whatever you call yourself in that get-up. I'm about to go off and make myself slightly less alive." For the next hour, I waltzed in bliss. I merged with my people. I spoke with sass and snark. I laughed the glittering laugh that I had practiced for what seemed like hours in the mirror of the apartment. Men spoke to me. One even asked me to dance. Of course, I had to refuse. He was twice my age. But I did not complain, not once. The night was going swimmingly. Robert had disappeared somewhere with some brain-numbingly vapid young thing. Morris had yet to run into the fronds he was fuming about earlier, and Sammy was settling into his normal drunken swagger. I was finally myself for the first time since I'd found myself lying on my side in the cul-de-sac in front of my family home. I moved with the crowd until halfway through Judy Garland's Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It was at that point that the taller guys in the crowd tensed up. I had no clue as to why, but I quickly learned through scattering whispers which underlay the late, as of that week, Miss Garland's sweet melodies. Cops, undercover, outside, Be back soon. My heart stopped. I couldn't be arrested. I had rent to pay and a job to work. I wasn't wearing any men's clothing under this damn dress either. I could and would be arrested. This place was run by the mob, for God's sake. I quickly worked my way to the edge of the loosening crowd. The signal lights had not come on yet, but couples were beginning to drop their holds on each other. Some remained oblivious. I shuffled towards the restroom. There was no back door. I could ride it out in there, I was sure. I only broke into a high-heeled hustle when I heard the front door slam open in a booming voice. "We're taking the place!" Panic ensued. I was ahead of a crashing wave headed for the restrooms. Some lunged for the restroom's windows. Others quickly disrobed and crawled into men's clothing. I cried. I unleashed the Nile from my left eye and the Amazon from my right, both of which quickly ran black with mascara. There was no escape. The booming voices from the bar continued. There was no response that I could hear from the patrons. The men who had changed into normal garb quickly filed out of the restrooms to stand in line in order to present their IDs. Some lingered in the restroom. I locked myself in a stall and threw my heels into a corner. I was Jeremy again. The beaded dress I was so proud of earlier wasn't going to protect me in jail. I had lost my home and my family, and tonight I was going to lose my newfound self. I did the only thing I could think to do in my blind, unthinking panic. I pulled my lipstick out of my clutch and began to scrawl my last will and testament on the plywood wall of the stall. Fear has always touched me in the head a bit more than most. That night, it told me I was going to die for sure. "Dear friends," I began, "these are the final wishes of Jeremy Flynn of Greenwich Village. To that guy you asked me to dance early tonight, I leave my dress. To Morris Washington, I leave all my clothing. You're a good guy, Morris. Morris Washington, born October 19th, 1945, died January 3rd, 1990, overdose. To Sam O'Malley, I leave the bottle of bourbon I left hiding under my bed. I hid it from you, but you can have it now. Samuel O'Malley, born June 2nd, 1947, died sometime in May 1978, beat to death in an alley. To Robert Drummond, I leave nothing. Suck it, Robert. Robert Drummond, born February 17th, 1949, died the same day, 1983. Complications from acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. I was almost done. Sincerely, nothing came, either from my now empty tube of lipstick or from my empty mind. This was it. I'd found my name. I straightened and viewed my handiwork. This was the culmination of the pages I'd hidden from my father. I had gone from being a scared kid on the asphalt to being a lipstick stain in a smutty gay bar in Greenwich. But by God, I was a gorgeous tube of lipstick while I lasted. I stood at my full height and brushed my dress off. I slipped back into the high heels I'd thrown a moment ago. Judy Garland was on her final notes as I walked out the stall door and dabbed at my face as much as I could before strutting out of the restroom. I did not die that night. I would instead spend it in jail, but I would chant and scream and fight before that ended up happening. I had woken up that morning as Jeremy Flynn, but I walked back onto that police-occupied dance floor as Queen Sincerely Jeremy's. Thank you.
Taylor, that was a remarkable story. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank all of you for coming. Two things. The first, please don't forget, tomorrow night at 7 p.m., Janice Ray reading in this room. So please come back for that. It'll be a great reading. And second, please join us outside. There is a small reception. Delicious meatballs is what I hear. And thank you all again. And give ourselves a hand before we... Thanks and good night. And,